Hello guys, tonight we're beginning a slow, thoughtful journey into one of the more hidden corners of history. Calm, strange and quietly powerful. We're going to drift together into a time when quiet prayers turned dangerous, when ancient traditions met foreign faiths, and when the shadows of politics, loyalty and belief intertwined across feudal Japan. But first, before you get cozy, I have a gentle request. Tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Is it the early morning hours when the sky begins to pale? Or late at night with the hush of the world tucking in around you? Now, wherever you are, make yourself comfortable. Pull your blanket up to your chin or stretch out just a little more. Let your breathing slow. Let your eyes grow heavier. Let the day drop away. You're safe here. You're just going to listen now and sleep if you like. You don't need to remember the facts. Just drift along with the story. You are standing at the edge of a rugged harbour, sometime in the late 1540s. The wind carries the scent of salt and pine, and the cries of gulls echo overhead. Before you stretches the sea, softly rippling under a cool grey sky. Your feet rest on worn wooden planks, damp with sea mist. This is Kagoshima, in southern Kyushu, a quiet port, for now. Behind you, narrow lanes twist through wooden homes and tea shops. But today, all eyes are toward the sea. A ship has appeared on the horizon. Strange. It's unlike anything seen here before. Tall sails, European rigging. The hull sits low and heavy in the water, as if carrying the weight of some distant empire. As it nears, you see unfamiliar faces peering down. Portuguese maybe, sunburnt, tired, yet watchful. And among them, a man in long dark robes, his eyes sharp and clear. He wears a crucifix around his neck. His name is Francis Xavier. For now, he speaks little Japanese, and yet his presence will change everything. You stand nearby as he disembarks, stepping carefully onto Japanese soil. His shoes sink slightly into the earth. His hands are folded in prayer. He bows, and the watching crowd murmurs. For Japan, this is not the first contact with outsiders. Traders from China, Korea, and even Southeast Asia have long passed through these shores, but something is different this time. The Portuguese carry with them not just guns, not just silk and gold, but ideas, strange ideas, about sin and salvation, about a single omnipotent God, about eternity, and to some, it seems beautiful. In the days that follow, you linger around the edges of the growing crowd. Francis Xavier is permitted to stay. He is quiet, respectful, and careful not to offend. He learns quickly that Japan is no stranger to complex beliefs. Buddhism, Shintoism, Confucian ethics. But Christianity, it is different. It makes bold claims, exclusive ones. You listen as villagers ask questions. Some are skeptical, some curious, but others, you can see it in their eyes. A kind of recognition, even hope. Javier speaks of a God who loves the poor, the outcast, of a heaven open to all, regardless of birth. This is a deeply hierarchical society. That is radical. And so it begins. Let your breathing slow now. The journey we're on will take us through decades of rising tension, secret conversions, brutal choices, and the weight of empire. You will see emperors rise, samurai kneel, and crosses hidden beneath floorboards. There will be violence, yes, but also humanity. The quiet courage of those who prayed with the knowledge that doing so could cost them everything. But not yet. For now, just the sea, just the sound of gulls, and the wind against your sleeves. You sit with the villagers as dusk falls. Lanterns blink to life like fireflies. You can still see Javier speaking gently to a small group of listeners under the eaves of a shrine. His voice is low, unfamiliar, but the story he tells, of grace, of redemption, is strangely soothing. And as the sun vanishes behind the mountains, you feel something soft settle over you. Not certainty, not fear, just stillness. You remain in Kyushu as the weeks drift by, drawn into the quiet stirrings of change that ripple through this southern edge of Japan. The year is 1549, and you witness how something almost imperceptible begins to grow around Francis Xavier and his companions. At first, it's only the poor who gather, those on the margins of society, fishermen, farmers, labourers with worn hands and bowed heads, intrigued by this new faith that speaks of universal dignity, of love that exists beyond caste or clan. But soon, something far more significant happens. The Jesuits, clever and pragmatic, realize that to survive in Japan, they must work not only from the bottom up, but also from the top down. You watch as letters are carried by trusted hands inland toward the ruling elite of the region. The missionaries are granted an audience with a local daimyo, Otomo Sorin, a powerful warlord of Bungo province, whose authority stretches across the hills and valleys like the arms of a cedar tree. This is no naive man. He is as steeped in the code of the samurai as in the shifting patterns of political opportunity. But he listens. The missionaries bring gifts, glass beads, music from strange instruments, a brass mechanical clock that chimes on the hour, and more than these, firearms, matchlocks, the promise of trade. You stand beside the inner courtyard of Sorin's fortress, hearing distant echoes of conversation through paper-thin walls, voices low and measured. The daimyo is intrigued by the foreigner's ideas, but he is also calculating. Christianity is not simply a belief system to him, it is leverage. Alignment with the Portuguese means access to powerful trade networks, to wealth, to new weapons in an age where might is survival. And so, in the candlelit hush of an audience chamber, with retainers kneeling in silence, Sorin makes his decision. He converts. Publicly. You are there as the ritual is held. His baptism is quiet, restrained, but news spreads quickly through the towns and villages. A man of war, clad in lacquered armour, has now declared allegiance to a god from the other side of the world. With this act, the Jesuits gain more than just a convert. They gain protection, legitimacy. They are no longer mere wandering priests from distant lands. They are spiritual counsellors to a lord. And beneath that shelter, Christianity begins to flourish. Chapels rise in scattered towns across Kyushu. Bells ring in the morning mist. Japanese artisans trained by the missionaries carve crucifixes and Virgin Marys in soft local wood, their style unmistakably Japanese. Mary wears a kimono, her face shaped like the women of these islands. The faith begins to adapt, to blend. It becomes part of the landscape. You walk through one such village where the rhythm of life has subtly changed. Children learn Latin phrases by lantern light. A farmer crosses himself before tending his field. At the edge of the rice paddies, a tiny church with paper windows stands among bamboo groves. For a moment, it feels as though this new faith might truly take root in the soil of Japan. But you begin to notice something else too. Not everyone welcomes this change. In temples further north, Buddhist monks gather to discuss what they see as a growing threat. They observe the converts, the abandoned shrines, the slow decline in offerings at temple gates. In Kyoto, imperial officials hear rumours of foreign influence, of loyalties shifting westward. In Edo, still a growing power in the east, there are whispers. Some daimyos see Christianity not as a faith but as an infection, one that spreads silently and tears at the fabric of a society built on order, hierarchy and ancestral tradition. And so the seeds of conflict are sown. The Jesuits remain optimistic, but you, watching from the shadows, can sense that this golden moment will not last. The sun hangs low in the sky above the rice terraces, casting long shadows. You see the missionaries walking through the fields, speaking gently to new believers, but even as their words are filled with hope, the land itself feels tense, as if waiting for something to crack. Something will crack, and when it does, it will be sudden and irreversible. You remain in Kyushu as the years pass, and what began as a quiet curiosity has now become a matter of strategy. By the 1570s, Christianity has taken hold not only among peasants, but among warriors and rulers, especially in the southwest. The Jesuits, more established now, wear robes of black, move between towns on horseback, and oversee schools, churches, and even seminaries. The sound of church bells has become common in places like Nagasaki, a port town transformed by the trade the Portuguese bring. But Nagasaki is more than just a harbour. It is becoming a city shaped by a dual identity, Japanese and Christian. And that identity, for the first time, begins to threaten the status quo. You walk through the streets of Nagasaki and feel the strange texture of this new world. European ships in the harbour, priests on the steps of wooden churches, Japanese nobles reciting psalms in Latin. It is peaceful, for now. But far to the east, in the growing power centre of Japan, a man named Oda Nobunaga watches all this with careful eyes. He is a warlord unlike others. Ruthless, visionary, modern. He tolerates the Christians not because he believes, but because he needs allies. The Buddhist temples have long been political powers themselves, wealthy, well-armed, influential, and Nobunaga despises their independence. To him, the Christians are a useful counterweight. He welcomes Jesuits into his territories, allows them to preach, grants them permission to build churches even in Kyoto. You watch from the edges of one of these gatherings, silent, reserved, and tightly controlled. There is no joy in Nobunaga's tolerance, only calculation. He does not seek spiritual truths, he seeks dominance. The monks who oppose him, he crushes. You pass burned-out temples along mountain roads, still smoking, the scent of incense lost beneath the char of scorched earth. You see monks fleeing into the hills, their chants replaced with hurried steps. But Nobunaga's time is short. By 1582, he is dead, betrayed, assassinated, burned in the temple where he had once taken shelter. And in the chaos that follows, the fragile protection Christians enjoyed begins to fray. You feel it first in how people look at each other, suspicion, uncertainty. In the eyes of the Buddhist clergy, a new confidence returns. In the courts of Kyoto, talk begins again of the foreign threat. And into this fractured world steps a man who will change everything, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. You first see Hideyoshi, not in a temple or church, but on horseback, riding through a rain-slicked road, surrounded by banners of his crest, golden paulownia leaves fluttering in the wind. He is a commoner who rose through the ranks by sheer brilliance, and now he is Japan's ruler in all but name. He is pragmatic, like Nobunaga, but less tolerant, less trusting. The presence of Christianity among his people makes him uneasy. Reports reach his ears, Japanese peasants burning Buddhist idols, missionaries criticizing ancestral rituals, rumors of growing numbers of converts pledging their souls to a distant god, rather than their lords. And then there is the matter of Spain. You hear it first in fragments, letters intercepted, reports translated. Somewhere in a quiet room, Hideyoshi listens to an interpreter explain that Spain, like Portugal, sends missionaries ahead of its armies. The logic chills him, first the priests, then the merchants, then the soldiers. Is this what Christianity is? A soft invasion? A preparation for conquest? In 1587, the order comes. You hear it echoing through the courtyards of Nagasaki like a sudden storm. All missionaries are to leave Japan. All churches must be closed. The faith is no longer welcome. You watch as stunned believers gather their few religious belongings, crucifixes, rosaries, scraps of Latin verses, and bury them in gardens, behind walls, under floorboards. The churches fall quiet. The priests, ordered to depart, look back at the land they tried to cultivate, the people they have come to love, and wonder what they've done wrong. But Hideyoshi's message is clear. Japan belongs to Japan. Its spirit, its order, its harmony cannot withstand divided loyalties. And yet the suppression is not total. The foreign trade is too valuable. The Portuguese are still allowed in ports like Nagasaki. The missionaries, though banned, find ways to remain, disguised, protected by sympathetic daimyos, hiding in the shadows of castles. The faith does not disappear, it simply goes underground. You pass a small farmhouse one evening, a flickering lantern in the window. Inside, a family gathers in silence. No statues, no icons, nothing overt. But in the stillness you hear it, a whispered prayer, soft and trembling, passed from grandmother to child, in a language none of them truly understands anymore. Latin, worn thin by time and secrecy. They do not know what the future holds, but they still believe. The persecution has only just begun. You walk through the hills above Nagasaki in the first years of the 1590s, and the land is quiet in a way that feels deliberate. Paths are narrower, voices are lower. Even the air seems to carry the weight of caution. Christianity, though forbidden by edict, has not vanished. It has taken root deeper into the soil, like a tree trimmed of its branches but not yet dead. Those who still believe do so in secrecy. They are no longer converts. They are now Kokure Kirishitan, hidden Christians. You visit villages where nothing outward reveals their presence. Shrines to Kannon, the Bodhisattva of mercy, are maintained with devotion, but the names spoken within these homes are different. Kannon becomes a stand-in for the Virgin Mary. Statues, carefully carved and passed from family to family, are ambiguous, eyes closed in sorrow, robes flowing, hands held in gestures that could belong to any number of deities. But the faithful know. They know the symbols woven into the folds. They know the stories whispered through generations. They know what to hide and what to protect. You sit with a family in a back room, the doors shut tight. A child traces the sign of the cross, not in the air, but against the tatami mat, finger low, nearly invisible. An old woman chants a prayer in Portuguese, so distorted by memory and dialect, it barely resembles its original form. But the rhythm remains, the reverence remains. These are not people clinging to doctrine, they are clinging to identity. and it has begun to define them. Across the islands, small communities like these operate without priests. The last of the Jesuits have either left or gone deeper into hiding. There is no longer access to confession, no sacraments, no Latin masses. The rituals are handed down orally. The Gospels are told in fragments, half-remembered parables woven into folk tales. You watch a man teach his son the story of Noah's Ark, as if it were an old Japanese myth, the boat cast adrift on a stormy sea filled with angry spirits, the rainbow afterward a sign from a god they must never name aloud. And in the midst of this hidden world, Japan changes once again. In 1600, the Battle of Sekigahara tears across the heart of the country, and you see armies move like waves across the valleys, banners fluttering, ash rising from villages caught in the crossfire. When it ends, the dust clears to reveal a new shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, cautious, methodical, determined to seal Japan under a single rule. You witness him begin to reshape the nation. Roads are standardized, castles are measured and regulated, power is centralized in Edo. The shogunate begins not only as a government, but as a philosophy, one that believes harmony is found through strict control, that peace is maintained through uniformity, and that foreign influence is inherently destabilizing. Christianity, to Tokugawa, is not a religion, it is an infection of the spirit, a wedge between loyalty and rule, a source of division, not unity. And so he tightens the cords. In 1612, you see the new edict. Christianity is banned again, this time with sharper teeth. Officials are dispatched to search out believers. All citizens are ordered to register with Buddhist temples to prove their faith. Those who refuse face exile, torture, execution. Families are punished together. You walk the streets of Kyoto and see the first arrests. Men dragged from their homes, women forced to step on images of Christ, small bronze plaques called fumie. You feel the tension as villagers gather at shrines not to pray but to survive. If a neighbour accuses you, if a child repeats something he heard in secret, if even a rumour of belief escapes, it could mean the end. And yet, the Kakure Kirishitan persist. They become more ingenious. Prayers are disguised as lullabies. Teachings are encoded into poems. Sacramental wine is replaced with sake, communion bread with rice. In the absence of clergy, baptized lay leaders rise up. Men and women tasked with preserving rituals, officiating funerals, guiding new generations without ever drawing attention to themselves. They adopt a creed of shadows. You travel north to the islands of Amakusa and Goto, where the terrain itself offers refuge. Remote fishing villages, caves and forests serve as sanctuaries. In these places, belief remains unbroken. A mother places a paper cross beneath a floorboard before kneeling to pray. A boy recites a version of the Lord's Prayer that sounds more like a fisherman's chant. You realize something startling. In hiding, Christianity is not weakened, it is transformed. It becomes something distinctly Japanese, reshaped, refracted, fused with the land and its customs. But you also see the cost. Children grow up never knowing whether their prayers will condemn them. Elders carry secrets in their bones, knowing they must be buried with them. Faith, once a public joy, is now a private burden. You see a young girl stare at the sea from the cliffs above Nagasaki, her hands pressed in silent prayer, her face expressionless. Behind her, soldiers patrol the harbour. Her world is divided in two, what can be spoken and what must never be revealed. The shogunate is not yet finished. Its grip will tighten further, and soon the repression will turn not just systematic, but brutal. A message will be sent, carved in blood across the land. The sky over Nagasaki is grey when you return, not with storm clouds or sea mist, but with something heavier, something held in the silence of the crowd that has gathered at the city's edge. The year is 1597, before the full machinery of Tokugawa suppression begins, but already the wheels of punishment are turning. A group of 26 prisoners is being marched through the city. You hear their chains before you see them. They clink with each step, metallic, deliberate. Among the condemned are 6 foreign missionaries and 20 Japanese Christians, some barely more than children. They are being taken to Nishizaka Hill, where crosses have already been raised. The order has come from Toyotomi Hideyoshi himself, during his final years of paranoia and illness. After allowing Christianity to take root, he now believes it is a threat. He has heard rumours of Spanish intentions. He no longer trusts the motives of the missionaries. This execution is not just punishment, it is a warning. You are among the crowd that lines the path, and though you try to look away, your eyes return to the prisoners. They do not plead. They do not cry out. One boy, perhaps 12, walks with his head raised, singing quietly in Latin. Another man, Paul Mickey, a Jesuit seminarian, preaches even as he is led to his cross. They are crucified slowly. Ropes are tied first, then nails are driven in. You hear the first cry when metal meets flesh, but it is brief. The crowd, silent, watches as the figures hang motionless against the wind. From where you stand, their faces are turned east, toward the mountains, as though still looking towards something distant and untouched. This is the first public execution of Christians in Nagasaki. It will not be the last. Word spreads across Japan like a cold wind through rice fields. The message is received with clarity. This faith is no longer welcome. It is foreign, it is disloyal, and those who follow it will meet not exile or ridicule, but death. But something else happens too. The image of the 26 martyrs does not vanish. It lingers in whispers, in drawings carved into wood and hidden beneath floorboards. Their names are spoken in secret prayers. They become part of the faith itself, not lost, but added to its foundation. You walk now not as an outsider, but as one who sees the quiet defiance behind everyday gestures. A woman lighting incense before an image that looks Buddhist, but isn't. A fisherman, carving symbols into the bottom of his boat before setting out to sea. These are not just habits, they are survival. By the time Tokugawa Ieyasu fully consolidates his power, by the early 1600s, Christianity has already fractured. Some believers flee to remote islands, others publicly renounce their faith and continue privately. Still others choose to leave Japan altogether, departing with Portuguese ships, vanishing into the misty coastlines of Macau or Goa, leaving behind families and graves. In Edo, the shogunate issues tighter controls. Christian images are banned. Foreigners suspected of preaching are expelled or imprisoned. Fumie, small bronze or wooden plaques depicting Christ or the Virgin, are distributed across villages. Every man, woman and child must step on these images once a year to prove their loyalty to the shogunate. You are present in a town square as a fumie is laid out on a stone platform. People approach in silence. Some step quickly, without looking down. Others hesitate. A few break down in tears as they press their foot against the face of their god. Officials watch carefully, noting every twitch of hesitation, every shadow of doubt. But even this system, designed to root out the last embers of Christianity, becomes ritualized. Some believers learn to step lightly, just enough to pass inspection. Others create tiny grooves in the soles of their sandals so that their feet never touch the surface. The fumi, meant as a final humiliation, becomes instead a test of ingenuity. The faith does not disappear, it becomes embedded in the space between what is seen and what is believed. You follow a family back to their home after one such inspection. Inside, their home is quiet, modest. A scroll of the Buddha hangs on the wall. But beneath the floorboards lies a single carved medallion, an image of Christ worn smooth by generations of fingertips. A child is taught not just the story of the gospel, but the story of how to hide it, which neighbour to trust, what words to never say in public, how to live without being seen. Outside, Japan grows more rigid. The Tokugawa shogunate enters its height, enforcing a policy of national seclusion known as sakoku. All foreign influence is barred. The Portuguese are expelled in 1639. Only a tightly controlled Dutch trading post remains, isolated on the artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki Bay. No missionaries, no churches, no outside contact except for that which is strictly commercial, carefully monitored and politically safe. Christianity, once welcomed, is now buried under layers of law, suspicion and silence. But still, in the hills and along the coastlines, families gather in the dark to light candles and pass down names. They speak of the martyrs of Nishizaka, of prayers whispered into the wind, of a God they can no longer name aloud. The faith becomes not just a religion, but a memory preserved against all odds, something no edict can truly erase. You are no longer in Nagasaki. The city lies behind you, wrapped in sea mist and the echoes of martyrs' footsteps. Now you move inland to smaller villages tucked into the folds of the Japanese countryside, where rice fields mirror the sky and the mountains press close like old sleeping gods. It is the mid-1600s, and the Tokugawa shogunate is at its full strength. Peace, they call it, Pax Tokugawa, a peace born not of freedom but of rigid order, where every life is measured, recorded, and categorized. The roads are patrolled, the temples keep ledgers, the families are grouped into 5 house units, each responsible for the loyalty of the others. And beneath all of this, a faith survives, reduced to shadows and repetition. You sit inside one of these homes, low-ceilinged and dark. The walls are lined with straw mats and painted screens, and in the corner, what looks like a small Buddhist shrine sits untouched. But as the evening settles and the house grows still, a man carefully lifts the lid of a lacquered box hidden behind a loose plank. Inside is a figure, carved in worn wood, its face shaped like a cannon, yes, but the hands are pressed together in the Western way. A Maria cannon, one of the many fusion relics used to camouflage the forbidden. No one speaks, there is no sermon, only a quiet rhythm begins, a low chant, a series of syllables that once carried the pulse of Portuguese hymns but are now abstracted, melted into soft phonetics, passed like lullabies from grandmother to grandchild. This is no longer the Christianity of Francis Xavier. It is not the theological, organised religion brought from Lisbon and Rome. It has become something else. It is memory sustained through architecture not of buildings but of silence, repetition and gesture. Each household that survives the inspections carries a thread. No one sees the whole tapestry anymore, but each person guards a fragment. The official world, the Tokugawa world, knows nothing of this in its true form. They believe the threat has been extinguished. The Christian priests are dead or expelled, the ports are closed. The Fumi system works, or so they think. You witness the paperwork of the state, temple registrations, Buddhist affiliations, a census of loyalty. The Tokugawa model does not imagine that people might lie so consistently, so completely. They do not yet understand how faith can transform under pressure, how it can wrap itself in ritual, mimic the language of compliance and yet remain intact underneath. You see a child instructed to bow to the family altar, an altar of Amida Buddha, and then after the door is closed to press a hand to their chest in secret. The old men teach the story of Christ not with names, but with metaphor. The Lord becomes the Man of Sorrow, or the Lord of the West. The Virgin Mary becomes Holy Mother of Mercy. These substitutions are not accidents, they are tools of survival. You walk the paths between these villages and begin to notice the patterns. Certain caves are visited only at night. Springs and wells are marked with symbols that carry no meaning to the outside world, but serve as signs to the initiated. Even family names carry echoes, traced back to converts who survived the first waves of persecution and passed their stories not through books, but through oral code. This is a culture without writing, because writing can be found and burned. This is a faith transmitted not in open preaching, but in pattern and rhythm. Songs, flowers, even fishing knots become vessels of remembrance. And in this great silence, the community takes on new meaning. Without priests, every elder becomes a kind of guardian. Without churches, every room becomes a sanctuary. Without public ritual, every private moment becomes sacred. You realize that what remains is not weakened, it is sharpened, like stone under a river. The spiritual world for these believers is no longer something sought outside. It is internalized, carried in breath, in heartbeats, in the gentle touch of a rosary made of beans, or seashells, or carved plum seeds. But still, the risk is never gone. You witness one village swept up in a sudden inspection. An informant has spoken, no one knows who. The officials arrive at dawn, with torches and scrolls and soldiers. Houses are searched, feet are forced onto Fumi. A boy cries, not from guilt but from terror that his hesitation might be noticed. A scroll is discovered half-burned in a kitchen fire, the remnants of a Latin prayer, miscopied by someone who never knew the words. 3 are arrested, 1 does not return, and after that the silence deepens again. It becomes not only a protection but a wound. Families stop speaking of their ancestors. They bury their stories so deep that within a few generations, even the children do not know why they kneel the way they do, or why they chant certain words at dusk. Faith becomes a haunting, a memory that lives without explanation, a thing felt rather than understood. You begin to grasp that this is not simply the suppression of a religion, it is the transformation of one. In the capital Edo, the shogunate remains confident. Christianity is gone, they believe, and the outside world is irrelevant now. Japan will endure in its own sealed perfection. But below this surface, in these quiet rooms, you feel the opposite is true. The faith has not died. It has mutated, as all living things do when pressed hard enough. It has shed its robes and altars and names, but it still breathes. You are standing on a windswept plateau on the western edge of Kyushu, and everything around you is on fire. The year is 1637, and for months now the air has been thick with the acrid scent of rebellion. Villages that once whispered only prayers now echo with battle chants. Peasants, most of them impoverished farmers, fishermen and former samurai, have taken up arms. Their rice paddies have become battlefields, their homes burned out shells. Their faith, long hidden beneath layers of custom and code, has erupted into open defiance. You had seen it coming, the famine, the brutal taxation imposed by the daimyo Matsukura Katsue, the relentless persecution of Christians in the region. For years these burdens stacked one atop the other, until the weight could no longer be borne. It is not only faith that has driven these people to rebellion, it is hunger, desperation, and the memory of a time when their beliefs were not punishable by death. And now, thousands have gathered behind banners painted with crosses and the image of the Virgin Mary, symbols that have not flown openly in decades. At the centre of it all is Hara Castle, a coastal stronghold built on a rocky headland, abandoned years before but now reclaimed and fortified by the rebels. It is their last refuge. From its ruined towers, you can see the sea on all sides, a horizon of cold grey waves that offer no rescue. Inside the walls, over 30,000 people, men, women, children, huddle behind wooden barricades and stone ramparts, bracing for the siege that is coming. And it comes. The Tokugawa shogunate, startled by the scale of the revolt, responds with overwhelming force. Daimyo from across Japan are summoned, and soon tens of thousands of shogunate troops surround the castle. The rebels, armed mostly with hunting spears and a few salvaged muskets, are outnumbered nearly 4-1. You watch as cannons are dragged across muddy fields, siege weapons are erected, and the earth trembles with each blast of gunpowder. But the castle holds. For weeks, then months. You see the defenders ration food until there is almost nothing left. You see mothers tear strips of cloth from their garments to bind wounds. You hear the prayers, sometimes chanted aloud, sometimes murmured through cracked lips. Ave Maria, gratia plena, always in distorted Japanese Portuguese dialects, always with the same sense of defiance. Among them walks a boy, 15, maybe 16. His name is Amakusa Shiro. To many in the castle he is a prophet, a leader sent by God. They call him the Heavenly Messenger, and though he has no military experience, his voice carries through the storm of violence like a hymn in the wind. He wears white robes, he speaks of salvation, he promises that death is not defeat, but rebirth. But outside, the shogunate grows impatient. They bring in Dutch ships from the trading post at Dijima, and cannons begin to fire from the sea. The last food stores are gone. The rebels begin to die not from sword or shot, but from cold, starvation, and disease. You walk the inner courtyards and find silence, not from peace but exhaustion. The living are indistinguishable from the dead, and even the priests, those few who still survive, no longer give last rites. There is no time, there is no one left. And then, in April of 1638, the walls fall. The shogunate troops pour in. What follows is not battle, it is massacre. Over 30,000 are slaughtered in the ruins of Hara Castle. The ocean runs red for days. Amakusa Shiro is captured. His body is displayed publicly. His head is sent to Nagasaki. The message could not be more final. Christianity, the shogunate declares, has been destroyed. You visit the scattered survivors, now fewer, now quieter. They have no more prophets, no more banners, no more dreams of public worship. What remains is smaller, dimmer, but still alive. You see it in the way an old woman traces a symbol in ashes before baking bread, in the quiet humming of a lullaby that tells a story no child fully understands. Christianity in Japan has gone to ground, deeper than ever before. The Shimabara uprising is remembered not as a holy war but as a peasant revolt. The official histories will erase its religious roots. The shogunate will never again tolerate even the whisper of Christian belief. It becomes, from this moment on, the most dangerous crime in the land. But the memory of Hara Castle lingers like smoke on the tide. You are back in Nagasaki again, but it is not the same place you left. The sea still curves in a calm crescent around the harbour. The same salt wind still lifts the edges of your cloak, and the same green hills cradle the town like sleeping shoulders. But something beneath the surface has changed. Something final. It is 1640. 2 years have passed since the massacre at Hara Castle, and the silence that now lies over the land is no longer just cautious. It is absolute. This is the beginning of what some will later call the Iron Years. Years during which the Tokugawa shogunate forges a society so tightly controlled that even memory can barely move. The Sakoku policy, Japan's official closed country edict, is now in full effect. No foreigner may enter, no Japanese may leave. Trade is permitted only through the Dutch and Chinese, and only through a single point, the man-made island of Dejima, floating like an isolated question mark in Nagasaki Bay. You stand on the shore, looking across the water at that island. It is small, cramped, lined with warehouses and narrow homes for the handful of Dutch traders allowed to stay. They live under watch. Their ships are inspected. Their books are censored. They are not allowed to bring Bibles. They are not allowed to preach. And yet, to the Japanese authorities, they are useful. Technically Christian, yes, but uninterested in spreading the faith. Useful, precisely because they are dispassionate, cold, traders, not missionaries. You follow a Dutchman through the inspection process. He is tired. He hands over his journals, his clothing, even his personal letters. Every page is examined, every image scrutinized. You see an official pause over a hand-drawn illustration, a map that happens to include a small cross. It is removed, confiscated, and the trader says nothing. He has learned. Everyone, it seems, has learned. You return to the mainland and visit the town. There are no churches now, no images of Christ. The hill at Nishizaka, once stained with martyrs' blood, is now empty. The shrine stands nearby, Shinto, quiet and clean. People bow as they pass it. You bow too, it's safer. You walk the narrow alleys and hear only the sounds of trade, of domestic life, of neutral words. But beneath this clean surface, the hidden Christians, the Kakure Kirishitan, still endure. Their numbers are reduced, scattered and constantly in fear. They do not call themselves Christian anymore. They avoid all Latin words. Their prayers are shortened, distorted, made to sound like Buddhist mantras. You listen to one of these prayers as it is passed from mother to daughter. It is a chant now, barely recognizable as scripture, but its rhythm is old. It hums with the cadence of resistance. You visit a fishing village an hour north of Nagasaki. There, in a home half collapsed by storms, you find a wooden statue of the Kannon. But it has eyes that do not match the traditional form. In the right light, in the flicker of a lantern, you see it, a cross, faintly carved into the base, smoothed over by years of hands brushing past. The family does not acknowledge it. They offer you tea, speak only of the weather, but when the room is quiet, they bow to it as they pass. Not deeply, just enough. In the decades that follow, the shogunate's methods become even more thorough. They create networks of informants. They place pressure on Buddhist temples to serve as religious census bureaus. Every person in Japan must be registered to a temple. Every family must participate in the danka system, a web of loyalty that leaves no space for deviation. The Buddhist clergy too begin to act as agents of control, inspecting homes, guiding morality, ensuring conformity. You watch as a child is brought to a temple for the annual inspection. The priest smiles, the child bows. On the surface it is simple, a ritual, but the mother's eyes flicker with worry. She has taught the boy to chant both ways, one set of words for the temple, another for the home. 2 worlds, 2 truths, one for safety, one for belief. It is a delicate game, and one mistake could mean ruin. There are no priests anymore, no sacraments, no Eucharist. The theology fades, replaced by a kind of cultural DNA, fragments of belief passed not through understanding but through inheritance. Christianity in Japan has become something else entirely. A hidden shell, a vessel for pain and hope and memory, buried so deep that even those who carry it do not always know its origin, yet some still remember. You meet an old woman who speaks of a time, long ago, when her great-grandfather whispered the name Iesu at night. She doesn't know what it means anymore. She doesn't know what it was supposed to offer, but she weeps when she says it. And that, you think, is enough. The world beyond Japan moves on. In Europe, the 30 Years' War ends. Empires rise and fall. But here, behind mountains and sea, the memory of a crushed religion lingers, not as rebellion, but as rhythm, as silence, as fragments woven into the folds of daily life. And in the homes of the Kokore Kirishitan, as the years stretch forward, that silence begins to change them. Without guidance, without books or churches, the faith begins to drift. Some replace the Trinity with a pantheon of saints. Some begin to revere Amida Buddha as an avatar of Christ. Some blend Catholic hymns with local harvest festivals. And still, they kneel. They always kneel. You find yourself now in a room that no longer exists, or rather it does exist, but only as memory, as feeling. It is the mid-1700s. You are deep within the mountains of Kyushu, where the roads are barely roads at all, only worn footpaths threading through cedar forests and cold, crumbling hills. The villages here are small, scattered, and poor, and yet somehow even here you find it. Not a church, not even a shrine, just a quiet place in a wooden house, a corner near the hearth, where something sacred lingers. You are sitting on a floor of hard-packed earth. The fire is burning low. Around you a family gathers, but they do not speak of God, nor prayer, nor salvation. They speak of planting, of how many potatoes survive the frost, of how long the walk is to the market in Omura, of an aunt who is sick. It is a night like any other, and yet as the moon climbs and the wind presses gently against the paper walls, something changes. The grandfather, who has barely spoken all evening, clears his throat. He begins to sing. You listen. It is not a song you recognize, at least not at first. The words are unfamiliar, rounded and folded by time, by dialect, by centuries of oral transmission. But the cadence is unmistakable. It is a litany, a rosary, though none would call it that now. Each verse ends in a quiet murmur, ora, ora, ora pro nobis. Not Latin, not Japanese, but something between. Something evolved into a chant that sounds more like wind than language. The others join in, softly, not looking at one another. It is not performance, it is not ceremony, it is continuity. The rhythm of a faith too long hidden to ever fully resurface. You notice that there is no name spoken aloud, no Christus, no Maria, no Deus. Just roles, the Holy Mother, the Merciful One, the Suffering Son. Titles without labels, presence without theology. They are not praying to be saved, they are remembering how to remember. When it ends, no one comments. The fire is stirred, the room quiet again. You realize that the ritual is not separate from life. It is life. It has become so entwined with the rhythm of survival that it no longer declares itself as sacred, it simply is. You move from village to village over the next few years. In some, you find families that still kneel before Kannon statues with hollow eyes and secret names. In others, the faith has become barely more than superstition, a story told by grandmothers with no known origin, a habit of bowing twice before the first sip of tea, a peculiar fear of fish without eyes. You begin to see how belief, when suppressed for generations, becomes less doctrine and more inheritance, something felt in the body, not in the mind. Some families still hold secret objects. You see one wrapped in silk and buried beneath a rice bin, a single wooden cross blackened with age, another carved from driftwood and hung with shells. Others possess no objects at all, only gestures. A mother touches her forehead, then her heart, then each shoulder before placing food before her child. She does not know why, only that her mother did it, and hers before that. But you also begin to notice the erosion. Without priests, the sacraments have faded. Baptism is performed sometimes, but the words have changed. Confession no longer exists. There is no one to confess to. The Eucharist is spoken of in metaphor, if at all. Over time, the stories begin to blur. In one village, you hear the Passion told with local figures. Christ becomes a traveller from the west. Judas is a jealous samurai. The Virgin speaks in a dialect that didn't exist in Europe. And still the rituals continue. You watch a funeral. The body lies wrapped in white. A bowl of salt rests nearby. There is incense, and there are prayers. Some are Buddhist, some Shinto. And then, quietly, someone begins to hum a hymn that you half recognize. It has no name. It flows like water. You feel the presence of belief, but it is not Christianity anymore, not quite. It is something Japan has made from Christianity, molded through fear, need, and time. By now, the shogunate no longer fears these people. The regime believes the danger has passed. Christianity is a footnote in official memory, mentioned only in the context of the Shimabara rebellion, and even that is taught as a warning about taxes, not faith. The Dutch still trade at Dejima. The Dutch still avoid preaching. The Tokugawa world continues its long inward breath, and you continue to walk. You follow the traces of a religion that has become a ghost, not dead, but spectral. A quiet haunting of the everyday. You hear it in lullabies, in seasonal festivals that once marked saints' days, and now are simply dates on a calendar. You see it in the hesitation before someone steps over a threshold, in the way eyes close, just for a moment, before the first bite of food. The people no longer say they are Christian. They don't need to. The faith is buried so deep it no longer depends on language. But it is there, in the gestures, in the rhythm, in the silence. And in that silence, something waits. The century turns slowly. You are in the final decades of the 1700s now, and Japan still moves beneath the weight of the Tokugawa order, quiet, closed, and carefully measured. The cities are growing, though their walls remain high. Edo hums with merchant life. Kyoto preserves its old rituals. Osaka, down by the rivers, glitters in the lamps of rice brokers and silk traders. But here, in the far western corners of the archipelago, the remnants of the Kakure Kirishitan are still drawing breath in shadow. You are in a fishing hamlet on the coast, a place so narrow between sea and cliff that the tide sometimes reaches the threshold of homes. At dusk, the world turns silver, the sky, the waves, even the sand. The boats come in slowly, trailing ropes wet with spray. The children chase crabs between the stones, and the old men squat near the edge of the shore, watching the clouds for signs of tomorrow's wind. Everything here feels circular, even time. The family that has taken you in is simple. They speak in low voices, bow a little deeper than city folk, and cook rice with pickled seaweed, while the lanterns sway on crooked beams. There is no talk of gods, but in the corner of their home, behind a paper screen, you are shown something few eyes now see. It is a book, not paper but bark, thin sheets of wood, bound together with thread from an old fishing net. The text is strange. You recognize Roman letters, but the words are unreadable, an archaic script, Latinized Japanese with centuries of oral mispronunciation fossilized in ink. The book is read aloud only by the grandfather. He sits cross-legged in his thick robe, hands trembling, lips moving as he recites. You don't understand the content. Even the listeners, his family, don't understand. But they listen anyway. The rhythm is enough. The act is enough. There is reverence in the room, thick and humming like heat. No one needs translation. This is not about doctrine. It is about connection to those who came before. Later, in the flicker of an oil lamp, one of the daughters tells you the book is called Atenshi Hajimari no Koto, the beginning of heaven and earth. She says it came from her mother's mother's mother. No one remembers when it was first copied. It contains creation myths, fragments of Genesis and the Gospels, mixed with Japanese legends and Buddhist imagery. It is not the Bible, but it is their Bible. And they call themselves descendants, not believers. They do not know the creeds, they do not speak of Rome or Pope or Catechism, but they preserve this quietly, because they feel they must. The lanterns sway. and you realise this family has passed the fire not as flame, but as ash, warm, quiet, waiting. You travel again, eastward this time, through forested passes where moss climbs stone like a second skin, and you reach a village where the faith has turned inward completely. There are no names spoken, no books, only songs. A woman sings over a pot of soup. A man hums while mending nets. The tune is the same. You follow it for days before understanding its meaning. It is a hymn, or was once. Now it is just part of life's rhythm, sewn into labour and silence. There are whispers, too, of a group more cautious still, the Hanare Kirishitan, the separated ones. They broke even from the hidden churches. They trusted no authority, no structure, only the absolute secrecy of bloodline and home. You hear their stories only second-hand. A carved stone buried in a stream bed, a prayer whispered to fish before casting a net. They are not a community, not anymore, only fragments. Families scattered across coastlines and valleys, bound by nothing but a shared ache. The officials do not speak of them. The shogunate sees no rebellion now, only order. The sword that once severed heads now gathers dust. There is no longer a need for violence. Time has become the perfect executioner. It wears belief down more thoroughly than fire ever could. And yet, one day, you attend a wedding in a remote village. It seems entirely Buddhist. The temple stands quiet. The monk chants with practiced detachment. The offerings are made as expected. But during the final rites, as the couple bows, an elder woman steps forward and presses something into the bride's palm. A rosary. Old, wooden, missing several beads. No one else sees it. The bride closes her hand over it without looking. The moment passes. Later that night, under the stars, the woman tells you the story. Her mother received it on her wedding day too. It was passed from woman to woman. No one speaks of it. They don't even use the word rosary. They just call it the thing that helps us. Helps what? She doesn't know. She only knows it must be kept. And so it is. You begin to wonder whether this is faith at all, or simply memory, etched so deeply into the bones of life that it no longer requires understanding. You begin to wonder whether survival, not worship, has become the most sacred act of all. A single phrase remains in your mind from the book of bark and ink. You remember it not because you understood it, but because of the way it was said. Light hidden in darkness is not lost, it is waiting. You carry that with you as you travel, through seasons, through mountains, through lives that no longer believe and yet still do. You're older now, not in body, but in time. The century has turned. It is the early 1800s, and Japan is still beneath its blanket of silence. But you can feel it. A shift in the air. A soft straining of the threads that have held everything in place. The Tokugawa order remains firm on the surface. Banners still hang above castle gates. Rice tributes still pass along dusty roads, and the temples still record each soul by name. But beneath it, questions begin to stir. The world is changing just beyond the horizon, and Japan, despite itself, is beginning to hear it. You are in Nagasaki again. Not the Nagasaki of ash and crucifixions, but one that simmers now with purpose. The harbour is busy. Chinese junks and Dutch ships still drift in and out of Dejima, their sails pulled taut with ocean wind, their holds heavy with curiosities. Silk, porcelain, sugar, medicine, rumours. You watch as crates are offloaded and hoisted onto backs, as customs officers scrawl ledgers with brushes made smooth by repetition. You recognise the ritual, but something is different. The Dutch now bring more than goods, they bring books. You are invited to a gathering, not Christian, not religious at all, at least not in name. A group of Japanese scholars meets in a quiet room, lanterns flickering, tea steeping beside scrolls. They study the Rangaku, Dutch learning, Western science, medicine, astronomy, anatomy, and through it, slowly, a crack appears in the wall the shogunate has built. Curiosity has found a loophole. You listen as they speak of distant nations, of ships larger than castles, of telescopes that can see the moons of Jupiter, of clocks that never stop, of medicine that heals wounds without fire. But you notice that none of them speak of religion. Christianity remains a forbidden language. Even now, even as new ideas are permitted to trickle through Dejima's narrow gate, the word of Christ is absent. Yet in this space, between astronomy and translation, you hear it again. Quiet, uncertain, folded inside a question. One scholar speaks of ethics, of the Western concept of human dignity. He hesitates, then asks the others what sort of religion gave birth to it. No one answers, but in the silence, the ghost of a forbidden cross drifts across the floor like a shadow from another room. Outside of these scholarly halls, the hidden Christians continue, their rituals further softened by time. You return to the countryside and find the songs changed again. The syllables blur, names lose their edges. Some speak now of Du Susama as a spirit of the mountain, a protector, a voice heard in wind and waves. Others say Maria Sama watches over childbirth. It is no longer doctrine, it is folk memory, myth shaped by need. But it persists. You visit a home where a baptism is taking place. It is not public, it is done in the dark, by an old woman with a ladle of seawater and a voice made brittle by age. The child is swaddled in white, eyes wide. The words she speaks are a mixture of Latin and Old Japanese, twisted into something wholly new, a secret dialect spoken by no one else on earth. When she finishes, she kisses the child's forehead. There is no mention of sin, only protection. In another village, far up a forested slope, you are shown an image carved into a rock behind a waterfall. It is worn smooth by centuries of spray, but when the sun hits it just right, you see it, a cross, barely visible, almost accidental. But when you mention it to the local farmer who showed you the path, he nods, expression unreadable. Old thing, he says, older than memory. We bow sometimes, just in case. You wonder if he knows what it is, or if knowing even matters anymore. And then, as you travel further north, you hear a rumour. A ship has arrived, one that did not come from Dejima. A foreign vessel, massive and black-hulled, forced to anchor by bad weather. The authorities scrambled, the villagers stared, the sailors never disembarked, but word of their presence spread like lightning. They were not Dutch, not Chinese. They spoke another tongue entirely, and among their possessions, someone whispered, was a Bible. You feel the tension stretch across the country, like a taut cord. The Tokugawa officials are alert again. More patrols, more questions. Even though the strangers leave, even though the storm passes and the ship disappears over the horizon, something has changed. The thought has returned, the fear, and for the first time in decades you hear a government official refer to Christianity not as a memory, but as a threat. The edicts are reissued, inspections increase. The fumi, those cruel images of Christ meant to be stepped on in proof of non-belief, are brought out again. Dust is brushed from the wood, people line up. Most step quickly, some hesitate. One man, elderly, falters. You watch his foot hover. Just for a moment, a tremble, a breath held too long, then with a forced exhale he presses down and walks away. Later that night you find him sitting alone in a garden, staring up at the moon. I don't even know what I believe anymore, he says softly, but I remember that I once did. And that remembering hurts. He doesn't ask for comfort, he only wanted someone to hear. You realise then that the faith is no longer a structure in Japan. It is not a church, it is not theology. It is the ache of memory, a sorrow shaped like prayer, an echo with no voice left to call it. But the gate is beginning to creak, you sense it in the air, in the sea, in the cautious eyes of the young men translating books by candlelight. You feel it in the steady pressure of time against the walls that have held the world out for over 2 centuries. It is still dangerous, but something is coming. You don't see the ships at first, you feel them. It is the summer of 1853 and the sky over Edo Bay is white with heat. The air hangs thick over the water, quiet, still, waiting. And then, without warning, the silence breaks, smoke, tall masts, sails furled tight. Iron hulls, gleaming black like ink poured into the sea. 4 ships vast and terrible appearing on the horizon like an omen from a forgotten world. The people of Uraga stare in disbelief, some in awe, many in fear. The black ships have arrived. You are standing on the shore with the others, sandals sinking into the damp sand as the first low notes of the foreigners' cannons echo across the water, not fired in anger, but as a signal, a statement. The Americans are here, and they are not hiding. This is Commodore Perry's fleet, and their very presence tears a hole in the fabric of Japan's seclusion. They carry with them not just trade demands, but the weight of an entire world pressing inward. The villagers whisper. Some believe these ships are monsters, machines powered by sorcery. Others know better, have heard rumours through Dutch channels, read strange scientific pamphlets in the margins of Rangaku studies, but for most, it is like watching history turn inside out. The world they thought was eternal is suddenly unstable. You watch from a nearby temple as the samurai gather, their armour polished, blade sharp, eyes uncertain. They stand ready, but they are not fools. Their swords are no match for cannonballs. Their courage cannot command the tides. The shogunate is stunned. Negotiators are sent, meetings held in heavily guarded halls. Perry demands the opening of ports, and behind that demand lies something deeper, something the shoguns recognise too well: inevitability. But it is not only trade that comes with these ships. It is not only coal and clocks and rifles. It is books, missionaries, ideas. It is the sound of hymns sung on deck by sailors. It is the whispered prayers before meals. It is the Bible, once burned in the streets of Nagasaki, now arriving again like an old ghost refusing to vanish. You find yourself walking through Edo in the days after the ships depart. People are unsettled. A merchant closes his stall early. A boy stares out to sea for hours. Officials retreat into meetings. Letters are written with hands that tremble slightly. Even those who hated the old ways begin to fear what might replace them. The Tokugawa peace, long calcified, has been cracked. In a quiet home near the Sumida River, you meet a man who once trained as a Confucian scholar, but now works as a translator for the magistrate. He has acquired, somehow, an English-language Bible. He shows it to you like it's a forbidden relic, which it is. The text is incomprehensible to him, but he touches the pages gently, reverently, as if the paper holds more than just meaning, perhaps memory or consequence. "Do you think they will try again?" he asks you, eyes darting toward the distant sea. The Christians. You do not answer. You both know the answer. Yes, and they already have. For even now, as Perry's fleet prepares to return, this time with more ships, more pressure, rumours are stirring in Kyushu. The descendants of the Kokuri Kirishitan, long silent, have begun to listen again. They hear the change in the wind. They hear the foreign tongues on the docks. They see the faces of sailors who wear crosses openly, without shame or fear. And some begin to speak. Not many, not loudly. But the silence is breaking. In one fishing village near Hirado, an old man digs up a carved figure from beneath a floorboard where it had slept for generations. It is a statue of the Virgin Mary, but with features smoothed into Japanese form. To the unknowing eye, she is just another bodhisattva. But to those who remember, she is Maria Sama, the Lady of Sorrows. He places it on a shelf by the door. Nothing is said, but it is seen. In another place, a girl kneels by the water and hums a tune no one taught her. She says it came in a dream. Her grandmother hears it and begins to cry. It is a hymn her own grandmother used to sing when she was small, before the priests disappeared. And deep in Nagasaki, beneath a quiet house, a secret is kept. A small gathering, just 5 people, kneeling in silence before a candle. No words, no rites, just breath, just memory. And in that stillness, a hope begins to flicker. The black ships return the next year. More of them, more firepower, more demands. The shogunate folds. Treaties are signed. The ports begin to open. And with them, slowly, carefully, the missionaries return. First the French, then the Spanish, then the Americans. They are cautious. Some remembered too well the bloodshed of the past. But they come. And one by one, the hidden Christians begin to emerge. Not all, not even most. Many remain silent. Some no longer believe. Some fear retribution. Some are too changed to recognize the new form of faith that returns with foreign flags and European robes. But some come forward. You watch as a priest, newly arrived in Nagasaki, is approached by an old man who speaks haltingly, nervously. The priest offers a blessing. The old man falls to his knees. Then others come, their Japanese accents thick, their words broken, but their faith unmistakable. One of them points to the priest's crucifix. Eyes shining, he whispers, "We kept that, in secret. We kept it. It has been over 200 years. The gate has opened." Now you stand on a hillside above Nagasaki in the spring of 1865. Cherry blossoms drift through the air like falling embers, soft and weightless. The wind is gentle, carrying with it a faint murmur of the sea below and the sharper clang of foreign bells. bells that have not rung here for centuries. Below you, a new church stands. Stone, whitewashed, modest by Western standards, but it gleams like something out of a dream against the green slope behind it. The doors are open. Hura Church. It is built by the French, a Catholic outpost planted carefully on the edge of the old port. It rises near the former execution grounds, not far from where the martyrs once fell. A new symbol of Christ now stands. You descend the slope slowly, watching as curious passers-by pause in the road, uncertain whether to stare or bow or walk away. You feel the tension in the air, not fear, not anymore, but disbelief, reverence, a quiet astonishment. Inside it is dim and cool. The air smells of old wood, stone dust, and candle wax. The crucifix looms above the altar, and beneath it a man kneels. A French priest, still young, still hopeful, his Latin quiet, practiced, echoing off walls that have never heard such words. He does not know what is coming, because just then from the rear of the chapel 3 figures enter. You hear only footsteps at first, then silence. They are villagers. You recognize the way they dress, plain, heavy, faded. The woman in front holds something wrapped in cloth, pressed tight to her chest. They stop at the front pew, heads low. The priest rises, uncertain. He says nothing. The villagers do not kneel. They do not cross themselves. Instead, the woman steps forward. Her voice is trembling but clear. The heart within us is the same as yours. Silence. The priest blinks, unsure if he has heard correctly. But then the cloth is unwrapped, and you see what she carries. A worn statue. Not of a saint. Not quite of Mary. The features are crude, smoothed by time and use, its origin uncertain. But the gesture of the hands is unmistakable. She is praying, the Virgin, as remembered across centuries of silence. Then the woman speaks again. "Where is Santa Maria?" And now the priest understands. You watch as his eyes fill, you watch as his hands tremble, you watch as centuries collapse in a single breath. These are the descendants of the Kakure Kirishitan, the hidden Christians. They have come back. But what they bring with them is not what the missionaries expected. Their faith is old, distorted perhaps, adapted, frayed. They do not know the catechism. They do not know Latin. Their liturgy is whispered in archaic Japanese. Their rosaries have no crosses. Their songs are slow and haunting, unlike anything sung in Rome. Yet what stuns the priest most is not how different it all is, but how much remains. They know of baptism, they know of the Trinity, though they cannot explain it. They name Mary not as Queen of Heaven, but as Compassionate Mother. They remember the martyrs not by name, but by the way they died. They carry fire not in doctrine, but in memory. And in that memory they have preserved something that even persecution could not extinguish. But this return is not without complication. Word spreads. The church in France and Rome is amazed. Reports are sent. The Vatican is stunned to learn that Christianity, thought completely eradicated, has survived in secret for more than 250 years. It is hailed as a miracle. More priests are sent, more churches are built, baptisms increase. And yet, for many of the hidden Christians, something is lost in the return. The faith they preserved was not just religion, it was family, it was secrecy. It was the rituals woven into rice planting, the prayers whispered while wrapping a newborn in white cloth, the stone statues buried beneath floorboards that no one dared name. Now they are being asked to surrender those things in exchange for the true faith. Some do, gladly. They embrace Catholicism as it was meant to be. They weep before the crucifix. They receive the Eucharist for the first time in generations. They confess their sins with voices cracked by age and relief. But others hesitate. Some leave. Some say the foreign priests do not understand what it meant to carry faith in silence. They say the rituals were not errors, they were survival. Thus begins a strange and gentle schism between those who return fully to Rome and those who choose to keep the old ways, unchanged. The latter become known now as Hanare Kirishitan, the separated Christians. They do not reject the church, but they keep their secrets. They perform their own rites. They do not kneel in the new churches. They remain on the edge, caught between memory and modernity. You visit one such home in a narrow valley west of Omura. Inside, there are no statues, only stones arranged in a pattern known only to the family. They gather once a month. They recite prayers passed down orally, the language half recognizable, half sung. They do not use the name of Christ. They call him simply the one who endures. You ask them if they believe the same as the French priests. The elder shrugs. "We believe in what our ancestors gave us," she says. "We believe because we remember." It is enough for them. Outside, the world is changing quickly. The shogunate is failing, power shifts to the emperor. The Meiji Restoration is stirring. Japan is opening, painfully, unevenly, but unstoppably. New laws are written. Railways spread. Western clothes appear on government officials. A new era is dawning, and with it, a new place for Christianity. But for the ones who carried it through silence, change brings more than freedom, it brings loss. Loss of control over their story. Loss of the old secrecy that gave their faith its shape. Some rejoice, others mourn, but all agree on one thing. It is no longer hidden. What was once buried beneath ash and fear now walks again in the open sun. It is 1873, and a document is signed in Tokyo. You aren't there to witness it directly, but its consequence drifts quietly across the country, like a ripple from a stone thrown into still water. The government, newly formed and still brittle under its Meiji robes, has lifted the ban on Christianity. Just a single line in the sea of political reforms. But for some, it might as well be thunder. The edicts posted on village gates for over 2 centuries, demanding public denunciation of Christ, are pulled down. The fume, those worn wooden icons of Jesus used to test loyalty by forcing believers to trample on his image, are gathered, burned, or stored away in museums. A page is turned, an era ends. But it is not celebration that you feel, not entirely. In the places you travel, it is confusion that dominates. The villagers who have feared and hated Christians for generations, taught that they were traitors, spies, perverters of harmony, do not change their hearts overnight. You feel their suspicion in the markets, in the quiet murmurs along roadsides, in the way people glance over their shoulders when speaking the word Kirishitam, still half-whispered even when no danger remains. For the government, Christianity is no longer a threat, but an embarrassment, one of many old policies now being scrubbed away in the rush toward westernization. To the Meiji leadership, the lifting of the ban is not an act of mercy, it is political necessity. Foreign nations, especially the French and Americans, have pressed hard for religious freedom as a condition of trade. Japan wants railroads, factories, modern armies, so it makes a concession. But to the people who hid their crosses in rice jars, who passed prayers from mother to daughter like heirlooms, the moment is something else. In Nagasaki, you visit a newly built Catholic school run by French nuns. Children laugh in the courtyard, their uniforms crisp, their hair neatly braided. Many of their parents are returnees to the church, once Kakure Christians, now openly practicing again. Inside the chapel, the air is heavy with incense. A choir sings, not the old mournful songs of the hidden years, but Latin hymns, precise, structured, beautiful. And yet, outside the gates, on a quiet hillside path, you meet a woman who has never stepped through that door. She is old, her back stooped, her eyes nearly clouded. She carries a wooden comb and a small pouch of dried herbs. When you ask her about the church, she smiles faintly. "We watched over the flame when no one else could," she says, "and now they say we lit it wrong." You follow her to her home, a weathered house with a small garden. Inside, she shows you a box. Within it, a rosary made of black seeds, a piece of cloth embroidered with a strange pattern, part cross, part flower, and a folded scrap of paper on which is written a single word in Roman script, Deusu. She lights a single candle and sets it beside the box. She does not pray aloud, but the silence between you hums with something heavy, something enduring. In Tokyo, Christianity becomes fashionable among some elite families. They send their sons to mission schools, their daughters to piano lessons taught by Irish nuns. Churches rise in red brick, their spires new additions to the skyline of tiled roofs and wooden beams. The emperor does not convert, but he tolerates. The press mentions Christmas as a curious Western custom. Some celebrate it, others dismiss it. But in the rural regions, in Amakusa, in Hirado, in the mountains of Goto, you travel by boat to one of the Goto Islands where the memory of persecution once pressed deepest. The hills are steep, the village is small, the dialect thick. Here, The Christians once carved hidden chapels inside caves and beneath stables. Now, real churches are being built, with imported stone, French designs, stained glass windows. But you find, in a small hamlet farther inland, a house where none of these changes have taken hold. They still gather in secret, not because they must, but because secrecy has become the language of their faith. They say it is how their ancestors spoke to God, without witness, without noise. When you ask why they have not joined the new churches, a man answers with a shrug. The God we know lives in the shadow, he says. We wouldn't recognize him in all that light. The priest in the village church knows about them. He has visited. He has offered communion, catechism, even confession, but they declined, politely. He bears them no ill will. He tells you, with a sad sort of fondness, they are the old river. We are the new stream. Both lead to the same sea, I think. It is not an easy coexistence. Within families, there are rifts. Children leave home to attend mission schools, come back speaking of saints and doctrine, unable to understand why their grandparents still hide prayer stones in the fields. Some choose one path, some the other. Some drift between both, and through it all, the state observes. Not always kindly, because while the ban on Christianity has been lifted, the Meiji government is not eager to see religion, any religion, become a force of dissent again. Shinto is elevated as the national creed. Temples are restructured to support imperial unity. Buddhism is regulated. Christianity, though allowed, is carefully watched. In some places, old anti-Christian prejudice returns in new forms. Christians are labelled as westernized, accused of betraying Japanese values. In schools, students who refuse to bow at shrines face pressure. Some churches are defaced quietly at night. There are no purges, no executions, but the shadows remain. You sit beneath a cherry tree, in a field once soaked with the blood of martyrs, now blooming pink and indifferent. A local boy walks past and hums a tune. It sounds like a lullaby. You realise, as he fades from view, that it is the melody of a Latin hymn, but softened, reworded, changed, a ghost of its former self. That is what you see now, all around you. Ghosts, not haunting, but living alongside. The suppression of Christianity is over. The samurai have fallen, the priests have returned, the ban is gone, and yet nothing has returned to what it was, because the faith that was driven underground has become something else. Not broken, not purified, but changed. And in that change, it has survived. The stone steps are damp from the morning fog as you climb the path to Shitsu, a quiet village tucked into the rugged coastline of the Sotomi district, far west of Nagasaki. Below you, the waves claw gently at the cliffs, soft yet persistent. Above, the sky is grey with coastal mist. You follow a narrow trail past old terraced fields and crooked wooden houses whose tiled roofs shimmer with dew. Somewhere in the distance a single bell rings, thin, hesitant, as if uncertain it is allowed to be heard. You come to a church, small, whitewashed, with modest, stained glass windows glowing faintly from the weak sunlight behind the clouds. It's unlike the towering cathedrals you've seen in the cities. Here, the church seems to grow out of the land rather than stand upon it. It is made of native stone and timber, its walls uneven, almost weathered before their time. Inside, the pews are short, hand-carved, and worn smooth by decades of quiet worship. It smells of salt, wood smoke, and old paper. A priest moves between candles with the slowness of someone who has lived his whole life in silence. This is Father de Rotz's church. You are in a place where history lingers just beneath the surface of things, like the roots of an old tree breaking through stone. Father Marc-Marie de Rotz was one of many missionaries who followed the lifting of the ban. But unlike others who built schools and seminaries in the cities, de Rotz came here, to the far margins of Christian survival. Sotomi was once home to thousands of hidden Christians, a region where the faith had gone underground most deeply, He arrived not as a conqueror, but as a gardener, digging patiently through silence and fear to uncover what was left. You read his letters, now kept in a dusty archive near the rectory. He wrote not only of sacraments and sermons, but of hunger, disease, typhoons. He opened orphanages, built a printing press, taught villagers how to make paper, print books, bake bread. His religion was lived as much through flour and ink as through prayer, and slowly they came back. But what they returned with was strange and unrecognizable to many of the priests. You sit with an old man in a hillside hut not far from the church. He carries a tattered book wrapped in cloth. He doesn't read French or Latin, but he fingers the pages reverently. He says his grandmother gave it to him, told him to keep it hidden until the priest came back. It is a homemade prayer book. It's Japanese written phonetically using Portuguese spellings. The prayers are warped by generations of repetition. The Our Father is there, but it begins with a line that makes no theological sense. He who eats the sky. You ask him what it means. He shrugs. That's what they said. We never changed it. You realise then that the faith which lived underground for centuries had stopped being doctrine. It had become a language of survival. Fragments, repetitions, symbols worn smooth by fear and use. And now, with the church returned, many of those fragments are being discarded, judged unorthodox. Some hidden Christians quietly surrender their practices and rejoin the official church. Others keep both worlds, attending Mass on Sunday and chanting the old songs at night in secret. A few reject the re-established church entirely, convinced that its grandeur has forgotten the cost of memory. In the archives of Nagasaki, you find drawings made by children of Christian families from the 1870s. They depict Christ not on a Roman cross, but in kimono holding a fan. Mary is drawn with black hair and a round face standing atop a dragon-like cannon, the Bodhisattva of mercy. These are not errors. They are attempts to fit a faith shaped in foreign soil into native roots. Syncretism, yes, but also survival. Even today, the debate lingers. Scholars call it contamination or adaptation. The church prefers reconversion, restoration, catechism. But for the families who kept the flame during the coldest centuries, those words are too small. You ask a woman, middle-aged now, with a silver rosary hanging beside a photo of her grandmother, what word she would use to describe what her family did. She thinks for a long time, then says, "We remembered." Sometimes remembering is harder than believing. You travel north to Urakami, a valley just outside Nagasaki proper. Once, this place was the heart of the Christian community. It saw conversions, then purges, then repopulation, and then in 1867 it saw another trial, the final expulsion. Even after the ban on Christianity was lifted, the government of the time exiled thousands of Christians from Urakami to remote corners of Japan, Aizu, Tsuwano, Kanazawa, hoping that scattering them would finally erase their defiance. But the opposite happened. In exile, families prayed louder. They formed hidden parishes in strange towns. Converted locals wrote songs in the dialects of their exile. When the law changed, they returned, not broken, but stronger. And they built a church, Urakami Cathedral. You approach it now, a vast red brick structure, modelled after European basilicas, rising proudly above the city. It stands as a monument to survival, yet you know its fate, because in the quiet archives of what is now the Catholic diocese, a yellowed letter describes what happened on August 9th, 1945, when the second atomic bomb fell on Nagasaki. The cathedral was nearly at ground zero. It was destroyed. Hundreds died instantly inside. Priests, nuns, children at prayer. The old bell was flung from its tower and shattered on a nearby hill. The faithful, those who had lived through centuries of persecution, were killed not by swords or fire, but by light. But even then, they rebuilt. Not immediately, not all at once, but year by year, stone by stone. Today the bell rings again, a new cathedral stands, and every year on the anniversary, the old faithful come, holding candles and photos praying not for vengeance but for peace. It is a strange and terrible symmetry. The religion once forbidden by samurai, crushed in darkness, was later burned again by the hand of war. But it endured, not unchanged, not untouched, but endured. You sit in the pews now. The afternoon light filtered through red glass onto the stone floor. A priest kneels before the altar. A child's voice echoes in the nave, reading from a catechism. Outside, the traffic of a modern Japanese city rumbles, indifferent, but inside it is quiet. Not empty, just quiet. You realise then that Christianity in Japan was never completely erased. It was made to kneel, made to hide, made to forget and remember again. But it was never gone. And like all things made to suffer long enough, it learned to wear silence like armour. You walk a coastline where the sea has carved gentle crescents into the land, far from the noise of cities and away from any guidebook's path. Here, in the lesser-known regions of the Goto Islands, the world feels unchanged in centuries. Wind-blown pine trees lean eastward in permanent bough, salt-dried nets hang between crooked houses, and the only sounds are the slow creak of wooden boats rocking in their moorings, and the intermittent call of gulls, circling endlessly above waters they've known longer than maps. The locals speak little of history unless asked. Even then their answers are not recitations but glimpses, short fragments, pauses, a gesture toward a shrine half swallowed by moss. It is not forgetfulness, it is quietness, a way of holding pain without turning it into spectacle. You walk with an old fisherman down a rough footpath that runs along a ridge. He carries a walking stick that's been carved with little notches over the years. At first you think it's a tally, fish caught, seasons past, but when asked, he just smiles. Steps, he says, each step someone took to stay alive. The path leads to a cave. Inside it's narrow and cool, the floor uneven with stone. There are no signs, no plaques, just a small clay pot placed against the rear wall, filled with withered incense. You crouch there, fingers brushing the surface. The fisherman watches you without speaking. This was once a hiding place, not for bandits or outlaws, but for mothers holding infants quiet, for men praying with whispered Latin that no longer made sense, for children watching light flicker on the cave ceiling and wondering why God needed them to hide. You imagine it, how the candles would have thrown shifting halos across the walls, how the salt in the air mingled with the scent of damp clothes and fear. You imagine the priests coming under cover of darkness, clothed not in robes but in fisherman's gear, carrying nothing but a memory of the Mass and a few wafers hidden in a tobacco pouch. You imagine the lookout posted above, scanning the water for approaching patrols, heart quickening at every distant sail. And then you remember the fuming. You ask the old man if one was ever used here. He nods. Not here, he says, pointing to the cave, but near the main village. There's a stone still buried there, under the old gate. My grandfather told me. The image rises unbidden in your mind. The worn bronze plate depicting the face of Christ, laid on the ground like a challenge. The villagers lined up in silence, the official watching with bored eyes, the foot raised, hovering for a moment. Some pressed down hard, as if to prove their loyalty. Others only brushed it, eyes averted. And a few refused. The punishment was swift, always. Beatings, imprisonment, exile, occasionally worse. You leave the cave and follow the man down to the harbour. On the dock, women mend nets while children chase each other barefoot over salt-stained planks. Above them, a small chapel rises from the edge of the village, its steeple short, its cross barely taller than the highest pine, as if hesitant to assert itself too loudly. Inside, it is humble. The altar cloth is hand-embroidered, the windows simple and clear. A crucifix hangs crookedly on one wall, beside a faded photograph of a man in priestly robes. Below it, an old woman lights a candle and closes her eyes. Her lips move, but no sound comes. You recognize the silence now. It is not emptiness, it is survival. Later, in the home of a schoolteacher who also acts as a village historian, you sit among shelves lined with family records, prayer books, genealogies. Some of the pages are brittle with age, others copied in recent years from memory. The teacher shows you a scroll written in Romanized Japanese, the letters awkward, slanted, as though copied by someone who did not fully understand what they wrote. We call it orasho, he says, from the Portuguese orachayo, prayer. He plays a recording, scratchy and faint, an old man's voice chanting in a low, almost monotone rhythm. The words are a blend of Latin, Portuguese, and Old Japanese. The cadence is hypnotic, like waves. It is not what you hear in churches on Sundays. It is older, more worn, more private. These are our family prayers, the teacher says. Passed down through the years we had no churches. Some families still use them, though fewer now. The children, they don't always understand. You ask what happens to them when the last speakers are gone. He doesn't answer for a while. Then, Maybe they fade, or maybe they become something else, like salt in the wind, still here even if you can't see it. The image stays with you, the taste of faith in the air, imperceptible but lingering. How a religion, even when banned, burned, scattered, could thread itself into lullabies and kitchen blessings, into gestures made over soup bowls, into the quiet pause before a name is spoken aloud. In another home, a carpenter shows you a set of beams pulled from an old house that had to be rebuilt. On the underside, invisible from above, tiny crosses had been carved, one under each joist, hidden from the eye but constant, like a spine beneath flesh. My great-uncle did it, he says, said it kept the roof strong. When he rebuilt, he carved them again. You realise then how much of the legacy of this suppression lives not in what is shown, but in what is done, quietly, routinely, unnoticed by anyone who does not already know to look. The passing of a rosary beneath a pillow, the way certain villagers bow slightly deeper at a stone that looks unremarkable to strangers, the story told not at dinner, but just before sleep, when the world is soft and listening. And now, the world these people live in is modern, but the lines beneath it are ancient, the trains run on time, the phones chirp, children play baseball in the same fields where once the faithful knelt and prayed to a forbidden god. You pass a group of teenagers laughing at a vending machine that swallowed a coin. One of them wears a small silver cross on a chain. When you ask her about it, she says it was a gift from her grandmother, who told her it was a protection charm. She isn't sure if it's religious, she just likes how it looks. Even in forgetfulness, something is remembered. And as you walk back along the shoreline, where the footprints of those who came before you are long erased by tide and time, you think again of that walking stick, the notches carved into its length, not just a count, but a memory, each one a choice, each one a name, and all of them, somehow, still walking with you. The sun is low, casting long shadows over the rice paddies that stretch toward the horizon, their waters reflecting the soft colours of dusk. You find yourself on a narrow country road, lined with dark cedars, their needles whispering secrets in the evening breeze. The village here is small, barely more than a cluster of wooden houses with thatched roofs and a single shrine that seems to watch silently over everything. In this quiet place, Christianity is not spoken of openly. It exists, but like a faint heartbeat beneath the surface of daily life. The memories of past horrors, the hunts, the trials, the cruel punishments are still present, though softened by time. You feel them, in the way people avert their eyes when you ask about faith, in the hesitant words of an elderly man who once hid a cross beneath his kimono, and in the way children mimic secret prayers with no one to teach them. This is the legacy of silence. You sit with an old woman inside her home, a simple room lit by a flickering oil lamp. Her hands are rough and worn from years of work, but when she reaches beneath a loose floorboard and pulls out a small wooden box, they tremble slightly. Inside the box lies a collection of relics, a faded rosary, a piece of cloth embroidered with a cross, and several handwritten prayers on fragile paper. She tells you these items were hidden during the years when speaking of Christ was punishable by death. They were passed down from her grandmother, who learned to pray in secret, whispering to herself in the dark so as not to be heard. "We prayed to survive," the woman says softly, her eyes distant. Her voice is steady, but there is a heaviness beneath her words, a weight carried through generations. The faith that once burned bright had been forced underground, folded into hushed songs and coded gestures. And though the ban on Christianity was lifted, the echoes of fear lingered long after. You ask her if she still prays. She nods slowly, a small smile touching her lips. Yes, but in silence. Outside the night deepens. Crickets chirp rhythmically, and the wind rustles the trees. The village sleeps, holding its secrets close. You reflect on how this silence was both a shield and a prison. It protected those who believed from the brutal eyes of the samurai and later the government, but it also isolated them, severing ties with the wider Christian world and leaving them to shape their own rituals and beliefs in isolation. In the distance, a temple bell tolls, marking the hour. Its sound is clear and resonant, a reminder of the coexistence of faiths in Japan. Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples stand alongside Christian churches, each with their own histories of adaptation and survival. You think about how faith, in any form, is often intertwined with identity, how it can unite communities or set them apart. In this village, Christianity is a quiet undercurrent, a thread woven into the fabric of life, but not always visible. As you prepare to leave, the old woman presses the wooden box into your hands. "Keep this safe," she says. "It is our story." You walk back down the road, the box warm in your hands, carrying with you the weight of silence, the resilience of a people who held on to their beliefs through centuries of darkness, who spoke in whispers when voices were stolen, and who continue to remember even when the world forgets. You are led into a dimly lit room deep within a modest house, its walls lined with shelves that groan under the weight of countless books and scrolls. The air is thick with the scent of old paper and cedarwood. Here, the past clings not only to memory but to fragile pages, some yellowed and brittle, others freshly inked but bearing the unmistakable marks of age and care. This is where a family has kept their secret for generations, a hidden archive of scriptures, prayers and catechisms passed down quietly, meticulously copied by hand. The oldest of these texts are in Kirishitan Ban, a mix of Portuguese, Latin and Japanese, written phonetically to preserve the prayers when no one dared speak them aloud. Others are adorned with sketches of crosses intertwined with native flora, symbolic attempts to root their faith in the soil of Japan. You gently open a scroll, its edges frayed and delicate. The writing is elegant but faded, words flowing in lines that curve like a river, bridging two worlds. You trace the characters with your finger, feeling the weight of generations who wrote these words in fear, hoping to preserve something that the samurai and the shogunate sought to erase. The family head, an elderly man with eyes clouded by age yet sharp with resolve, explains that these scriptures were smuggled and hidden, copied by candlelight, while the threat of discovery loomed like a shadow over their lives. The act of writing was itself an act of defiance, a way to say, "We are still here." He shows you a small book bound in worn leather, the pages filled with prayers altered slightly over time. Some phrases misunderstood, others blended with local customs. One prayer, meant to invoke the Holy Spirit, speaks instead of the breath of the wind that moves the trees, a metaphor born of isolation and adaptation. You sense the tension between preservation and transformation. This faith, shaped by persecution, became something uniquely Japanese, yet irrevocably linked to its European origins. The scriptures are both relics and living texts, symbols of survival and evolution. Outside, the sounds of modern life continue, the distant hum of a train, children laughing in the street, the low murmur of voices in the marketplace. But inside this quiet room, time seems to slow, and the fragile pages tell stories louder than any spoken word. You realize that these hidden scriptures are more than just religious texts. They are testimonies of endurance, chronicles of whispered prayers, and maps for souls who found light in the darkest times. As you step into the town square, the midday sun filters softly through cherry blossoms beginning to bloom, their petals drifting lazily in the breeze. The streets are peaceful now, lined with wooden shops and quiet homes. But centuries ago, this very place bore witness to a grim ritual that marked the turning point in the samurai's violent suppression of Christianity. You stand where the fumi once lay, heavy bronze or iron plaques, embossed with the image of Christ or the Virgin Mary, pressed into the dirt or cobblestones as a test of faith. Villagers, both old and young, were summoned to trample these images beneath their feet, to prove their loyalty to the shogunate and renounce Christianity. Those who refused faced imprisonment, torture, or death. Imagine the weight of that moment. The faces of neighbours, friends, family members, standing side by side, some forced to desecrate their own beliefs to survive, others willing to risk everything to protect theirs. The air thick with fear and silence, broken only by the reluctant shuffle of feet on metal. You hear the faint echo of whispered prayers, the hurried crossing of oneself hidden behind clenched fists, and the heavy, anguished breaths of those torn between survival and faith. Some children were made to participate, their small feet the first instruments in a brutal lesson of obedience and betrayal. This was not simply a test. It was a weapon designed to fracture communities and erase identity. the Fumi forced the hidden Christians to choose between life and belief, pushing many to abandon their faith under unbearable pressure. Yet, despite the terror, resistance flickered. Stories speak of secret gatherings where the faithful would meet under the cover of night, carefully avoiding patrols, whispering prayers that refused to be silenced. Some even created their own symbols, folded paper crosses, subtle hand gestures, to keep their beliefs alive without attracting attention. The practice of the Fumi continued for decades, a persistent reminder of the shogunate's resolve to root out Christianity completely. But it also sowed deep scars, not just on those who were forced to step on the sacred images, but on generations who grew up with these stories as warnings, as tales of sacrifice and survival. Today, where the Fumi were once pressed, a simple stone marker stands, unassuming but solemn, commemorating those who suffered. The village children play nearby, unaware of the weight of history beneath their feet, their laughter a soft contrast to the silent memories. You walk away from the square, the cool breeze carrying cherry petals past your face, feeling the lingering presence of those who once stood here, some forced to walk over their own souls, others who kept faith in the shadows, holding on to a hope that no stone, no sword, no decree could extinguish. The air here feels dense with memory as you enter a narrow mountain path, winding through cedar forests whose ancient trunks stand tall like silent sentinels. You have travelled away from the bustling towns and cities into the remote countryside, to places where time seems to hold its breath and history settles into the stones and soil. This is the land where the Kakura Kirishitan, the hidden Christians, made their lives after the samurai's iron fist forced their faith underground. You imagine the first footsteps on this path, centuries ago, when believers fled their villages after the edicts forbidding Christianity became ruthless laws, enforced by patrols of armoured samurai. These men were sent not just to rule but to obliterate what they saw as a dangerous foreign influence, threatening the shogunate's order. The once open churches were burned, priests exiled or executed, and those who remained were driven into secrecy. Here, in the dense forests and mountain caves, the hidden Christians carved out a fragile existence far from prying eyes. They built their homes in shadows, camouflaged by foliage and stone, and created hidden chapels disguised as everyday spaces. A bamboo grove, a hollowed tree, even a simple well. The line between the sacred and the mundane blurred, a testament to their ingenuity and desperation. You follow the narrow trail to a small clearing where a simple wooden cross stands, weathered but steadfast. It is a rare symbol, quietly defiant, marking a site once used for secret gatherings. You kneel on the soft earth, feeling the cool moss beneath your fingers, imagining the whispered hymns and prayers that filled this space, when voices had to remain low enough not to awaken suspicion. In these remote areas, the Christians developed their own unique rituals, blending Catholic prayers with Shinto and Buddhist customs. They adapted the Mass to fit the silence demanded by their persecutors, substituting Latin hymns with Japanese chants and using everyday objects as holy symbols. A rice bowl might stand in for a chalice. A statue of the Virgin Mary might be concealed within a wooden figurine of a local deity. You think about the profound loneliness and courage required to maintain faith in such circumstances. To pray, knowing a single slip could bring death or capture. To raise children steeped in secrecy, taught to lie about their beliefs. To fake reverence at Buddhist temples, while their true worship was held in the shadows. To live with the constant tension between outward compliance and inner conviction. An elderly woman from the village appears, her eyes reflecting the weariness and strength of generations. She tells you about her ancestors, who passed down prayers orally to avoid written evidence that could be discovered by the authorities. Their language evolved into something almost indecipherable to outsiders, a sacred code of words and melodies that protected their faith even as it transformed. She recounts how, after the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, when Christianity was legalized once more, many hidden Christians hesitated to return to the open church. Their rituals had become a private tapestry woven with fear, resilience, and adaptation. Some felt alienated by the mainstream Christian practices that felt foreign compared to the faith shaped in their mountain exile. You listen as she speaks of the silent, enduring bond between these communities, a faith held not just in prayer, but in shared suffering and survival. The samurai's violent suppression tried to erase Christianity from Japan, but it instead birthed a secret world where belief was transformed, hidden, and fiercely protected. As dusk falls, the forest grows quieter. The birdsong softens, the rustle of leaves slows. and the first stars begin to appear. You linger for a moment longer in the clearing, feeling the weight of centuries press gently upon your shoulders. The hidden Christians, though long driven into shadows, remain present, like the quiet breath of the forest itself, unseen but undeniably alive. You find yourself in a quiet, stone-paved street of a town that once stood as a crossroads between foreign missionaries and the samurai rulers who sought to control them. The air is cool, tinged faintly with the scent of incense and damp earth after a recent rain. The streets are empty now, but centuries ago this place was filled with tension, between zeal and fear, hope and brutal enforcement. You imagine the heavy footsteps of samurai patrols, clad in lacquered armour, their faces stern beneath their helmets. They carry the weight of the shogunate's authority, and the grim task of enforcing the ban on Christianity falls heavily upon them. Their orders are clear: root out the foreign religion, destroy its symbols, and punish those who refuse to renounce their faith. The price of disobedience is severe: torture, exile, death. The scene unfolds like a slow-motion play. A family is brought before a magistrate. The father, resolute but worn, is forced to step on a fumi, the bronze image of Christ set on the ground. His wife clutches a small child, eyes brimming with silent prayers. Nearby, neighbours watch in fearful silence, torn between loyalty and survival. The samurai wait, impassive, as the father hesitates, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. You feel the tension, the invisible lines drawn between obedience and belief, between safety and sacrifice. The father's foot hesitates, then slowly descends onto the image. The crowd exhales collectively. The punishment is momentarily avoided, but the burden remains, a mark on his soul, a fracture in his family's faith. Beyond the public trials, you picture the private torments, the nights spent in cramped dark cells, the interrogations that sought to break bodies and spirits, the whispered confessions that tried to force renunciation. The samurai's methods were relentless. Bamboo splints crushed fingers, water torture forced breaths to the brink, nails were torn from flesh. These were not merely punishments, but instruments of erasure. And yet, in the darkest corners of these towns and villages, faith endured. You see families gathered around secret altars, faces illuminated by candlelight, singing hymns that had been passed down in hushed tones. You see young children taught to memorize prayers without understanding their full meaning, as a shield against the eyes of informers. The samurai tasked with preserving order also wrestled with this violent duty. Some believed they were protecting Japan from destabilization, others perhaps saw themselves as guardians of tradition. But the cost was immeasurable. A society fractured, lives shattered, a faith forced into exile within its own land. As the evening settles, the town grows still. You walk along the deserted street, your footsteps echoing softly against the stones. You carry with you the memory of those who paid the ultimate price for their beliefs, whose courage carved a quiet path through cruelty, whose stories remain etched in the shadows of these streets. The morning light filters softly through paper shoji screens, casting delicate patterns onto the tatami mats of a modest but orderly room. You sit quietly, feeling the smoothness of the woven straw beneath you as the world outside begins to stir. This space once belonged to a samurai, a warrior whose role was not only to fight but also to govern, enforce laws and maintain the delicate balance of peace within the Tokugawa shogunate. You think about the samurai's complex position in this era of Japan's history, caught between tradition, duty, and the turbulent changes brought by foreign influences. Their code Bushido emphasized loyalty, honor, and obedience, yet it was often the very force behind the harsh repression of Christianity. To them, the new religion was more than just foreign. It was a threat to the established social order and the spiritual unity of the land. As you gaze out at the garden beyond the sliding door, its meticulous arrangement of stones, moss, and maple leaves speaks of control and harmony, ideals the samurai sought to protect. The samurai were not simply warriors but administrators, arbiters of justice who carried out the shogunate's edicts with precision and sometimes ruthless efficiency. You hear the distant clatter of wooden sandals on the gravel path, and imagine the samurai patrols moving quietly through villages and towns, their armor gleaming but their faces unreadable. These men were instruments of a system determined to extinguish Christianity, enforcing bans, conducting searches, and using intimidation or force when necessary. Yet, the story is not one of simple villainy. Some samurai were conflicted, torn between personal respect for the courage of Christian converts and their sworn duty to obey the shogunate's laws. Others saw their role as preserving the stability of a country that had endured centuries of internal conflict, fearing that Christianity's foreign origins might lead to division or invasion. The samurai's campaigns against Christians were systematic, marked by policies such as the sakoku, the national seclusion, which limited foreign contact and helped isolate Christianity. They conducted rigorous investigations, often employing spies and informants within communities, ensuring that no secret gatherings could persist without detection. Despite their power, the samurai could not entirely eradicate the faith. Their efforts drove Christians deeper underground, forcing adaptation but also resilience. The suppression reshaped Christianity in Japan, transforming it from a visible public religion into a hidden private one. As you sit in the quiet of this room, once belonging to a samurai, you feel the heavy responsibility that came with that role, the burden of enforcing harsh policies that altered the lives of thousands, the tension between order and compassion, and the complex legacy left behind. Outside, a single maple leaf drifts slowly to the ground, a gentle reminder that even amidst control and power, change comes quietly and inevitably. You find yourself standing near the bustling port city of Nagasaki, the salty scent of the sea mingling with the faint aroma of incense wafting from nearby temples. The harbour is alive with wooden ships, some foreign, some Japanese, their sails gently billowing in the coastal breeze. It was here, centuries ago, that the first waves of Jesuit missionaries arrived, men driven by faith and conviction, seeking to spread Christianity to the distant shores of Japan. You imagine the ships docking, the sailors disembarking alongside priests clad in simple robes, their eyes filled with determination. The Jesuits came from Europe, bearing not only religious teachings, but also gifts of knowledge, books, scientific instruments, and new technologies. They sought to bridge worlds, to find common ground with the Japanese people and the ruling samurai class. Their approach was often one of adaptation. They learned Japanese, studied local customs, and attempted to present Christianity in ways that resonated with Japanese culture and spirituality. The Jesuits translated religious texts, developed catechisms in Japanese, and engaged in respectful dialogue with Buddhist monks and Shinto priests. They hoped to show that faith in Christ could coexist with, or even complement, Japan's rich spiritual traditions. However, the presence of these missionaries also sparked suspicion and fear among the Tokugawa shogunate. The shoguns viewed Christianity as a destabilizing foreign influence, a potential tool of European colonial ambitions. The rapid growth of Christian converts, some of whom were daimyo, feudal lords, sympathetic to the new faith, was seen as a challenge to the established social order. The Jesuits themselves were caught in this turbulent environment. They balanced their mission with the risks posed by the increasingly hostile government. Some continued their work in secret after the official ban on Christianity, risking arrest, torture, or exile. Others faced martyrdom, their deaths recorded and commemorated by those who followed. You picture a Jesuit priest in a hidden chapel, his voice barely above a whisper as he leads a congregation in prayer, aware that discovery could mean death for all present. You sense the courage it took to persist under such conditions, the profound faith that fueled their mission despite relentless persecution. Yet, the Jesuits' story is also one of cultural exchange. They introduced Western sciences, arts, and philosophy, influencing Japanese medicine, astronomy, and even military technology. Their presence left an indelible mark on the islands, a complex legacy intertwined with both hope and conflict. As the sun dips low over the harbour, casting golden hues across the water, you feel the weight of these intertwined histories. The hopeful arrival of the missionaries, the fear and suppression that followed, and the enduring echoes of their presence in Japan's cultural landscape. You now find yourself deep within a misty valley, surrounded by steep hills blanketed in dense forest. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of moss and wet earth. Here, far from the prying eyes of samurai patrols and government officials, small communities of hidden Christians, Kakure Karishitan, found refuge. Their lives unfolded in silence, their faith practiced not with grand churches or public ceremonies, but through secret, intimate rituals woven into the fabric of everyday existence. As you step quietly through a cluster of simple wooden homes, you notice the subtle ways the villagers preserve their beliefs. There are no overt crosses or statues, no visible altars, but signs of faith appear in the most ordinary of objects. A patterned cloth draped over a hearth, a carved image hidden inside a family heirloom, or a particular way of folding hands during prayer. You watch a mother teaching her child a lullaby that blends a traditional Japanese melody with whispered Christian words. These songs have been passed down orally for generations, altered to conceal their meaning from outsiders, but carrying the same prayers of hope and protection. At twilight, the community gathers in a hidden grove, concealed beneath the branches of ancient cedars. The group sits in a circle around a small fire, the flames casting soft shadows on their faces. An elder leads a prayer, her voice low and rhythmic, mixing Japanese phrases with fragments of Latin and Portuguese. The ceremony is a delicate dance of secrecy and devotion. Candles flicker, incense burns, and hands make subtle signs known only to the initiated. You sense the layers of meaning in these rituals. They are not only acts of worship, but also acts of resistance, preserving identity in the face of centuries of persecution. The hidden Christians adapted the Mass and sacraments to fit their circumstances, sometimes replacing bread and wine with rice cakes and sake, or transforming baptism into a simple ritual of water from a mountain spring. The language they use has evolved into a unique dialect, a fusion of European prayers and Japanese speech, passed down by memory and song. Without priests or formal clergy, these communities rely on elders to teach and guide, maintaining faith through oral tradition and quiet determination. You realize that this hidden faith is both fragile and resilient, shaped by hardship but also by hope. It exists in the spaces between public and private, between silence and song, a living testament to those who refuse to let their beliefs be extinguished. As night deepens, the fire dwindles to glowing embers. The villagers slowly disperse, returning to their homes, carrying the light of their faith into the darkness. You linger a moment longer, feeling the profound quietude of a belief sustained not by grand monuments, but by whispered prayers and the courage to endure. You stand now in the shadow of a large wooden gate, its weathered beams rising high and sturdy, an entrance once to a provincial government office where samurai officials administered the strict laws imposed during the Tokugawa era. The weight of history presses around you, in the faint creak of timber and the quiet rustle of leaves in the courtyard. This was a place where authority was exercised with unyielding discipline, especially in the relentless enforcement of anti-Christian policies. As you walk slowly through the courtyard, you imagine the echo of official proclamations reverberating through the halls. These were the bansho or edicts issued by the shogunate, each one tightening the noose around the Christian population. From the early 17th century, these laws forbade the practice of Christianity under threat of severe punishment. Torture, exile, and execution were common consequences for defiance. One particular edict required all citizens to register with local Buddhist temples, a system known as the terauki. This registration was designed to root out Christians by forcing them to prove their adherence to state-sanctioned religions. Refusal or inability to comply was a sure sign of hidden faith, and often led to interrogation. You hear the hushed voices of samurai interrogators questioning villagers suspected of harbouring Christian beliefs. The interrogations were brutal, aimed not just at confession, but at dismantling entire networks of hidden Christians. Officials demanded the names of fellow believers, locations of secret gatherings, and possession of forbidden items such as crosses or prayer books. The shogunate also implemented measures such as the fumi tests, compelling people to trample on images of Christ or the Virgin Mary as a symbolic renunciation. These public acts were designed to shame and break the will of Christians, to make belief untenable in the open. Beyond legal restrictions, the government established surveillance networks, encouraging citizens to inform on one another. Loyalty to the shogunate was enforced through fear, suspicion weaving into daily life, fracturing communities and families. You imagine a village torn by betrayal, neighbours turning on neighbours under the pressure of these edicts, the heavy silence of unspoken fears hanging over every conversation. Yet, even under this iron grip, faith endured, sometimes hidden beneath layers of compliance, sometimes whispered in secret. The edicts shaped not only religion but the entire social fabric. The Tokugawa regime's desire for stability and control over a fractious nation meant suppressing anything that might threaten the rigid hierarchy they maintained. As dusk settles over the courtyard, you pause near the gate once more. The weight of laws long past still seems to linger in the air, a reminder of the lengths to which the shogunate went to erase a belief they saw as dangerous. As twilight deepens, you find yourself drawn to the gentle slopes of the Shimabara Peninsula, where the lush greenery of rice paddies and scattered villages meets the restless sea. The air is heavy with moisture, and the distant, muted roar of waves against rocky shores. This was the stage for one of the most dramatic and tragic chapters in the story of Christianity's suppression in Japan, the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637 to 1638. You imagine the rising tensions in the region decades earlier, a place already steeped in poverty and unrest. Many of the local peasants were Christian converts, caught in the web of heavy taxation and cruel treatment by their daimyo, Matsukura Katsui, whose harsh policies fueled resentment among his subjects. But beyond economic hardship, their Christian faith gave them a sense of identity and hope that connected them beyond their immediate suffering. In this fertile land surrounded by imposing mountains, thousands of rebels gathered, farmers, ronin, masterless samurai, and townspeople united by desperation and faith. They fortified themselves within the castle town of Hara, turning it into a bastion of resistance against the shogunate's forces. Their banners bore the cross, and their prayers mingled with the clashing of swords. You feel the cold steel of tension as you envision the prolonged siege laid upon them by samurai armies. The rebels, though poorly equipped, fought fiercely, driven not only by anger, but by their unyielding belief. The samurai, trained in discipline and strategy, surrounded the castle with relentless precision. The sounds of battle, arrows whistling, swords clashing, the pounding of feet, echo faintly in your mind as the two forces faced off. Yet, beneath the violence, there is a profound sorrow. The rebellion was crushed with brutal force. Thousands of men, women and children perished, many executed or crucified publicly as a grim warning to others. The surviving rebels' faith, instead of being extinguished, became a symbol of ultimate sacrifice. This rebellion marked the final decisive blow to Christianity's public presence in Japan. The shogunate, shaken by the scale and fervour of the uprising, intensified its persecution, sealing the islands off from the outside world even more tightly, and deepening the underground status of Christianity. Walking through the quiet fields where once desperate voices rose in defiance, you sense the weight of their struggle, a collision of faith and power, hope and oppression. The echoes of their prayers and cries linger faintly in the breeze, a haunting reminder of a faith tested by fire. You find yourself now on the rugged coastline overlooking the restless waves of the East China Sea, where the shogunate's policy of sakoku, or national seclusion, took firm root. This vast isolationist strategy, established in the mid-17th century, was designed to close Japan's borders and prevent the inflow of foreign influences, especially Christianity, which had been deemed a corrosive threat to social order and political stability. The salty breeze carries the faint sound of fishing boats returning with their catch, a reminder of a country turning inward, wary of the outside world. The ports once open to Portuguese and Spanish ships were now tightly controlled, and only the Dutch and Chinese were allowed limited trade under strict supervision. Missionaries were banned outright, and any hint of Christian practice was ruthlessly hunted down. You walk along narrow paths leading to small isolated fishing villages where rumours of secret believers still persist. These communities had no contact with the outside Christian world and had to maintain their faith entirely on their own. The isolation was not only geographic but spiritual. The connection to Rome, to Catholic priests and bishops, was severed, leaving the Kakura Kirishitan to preserve their beliefs in a unique and fragile form. In these villages, Christianity transformed further. Prayers became cryptic chants, symbols morphed into disguised talismans, and the original meanings often blurred over generations. You see a wooden figure, its features softened to resemble a local deity more than the Virgin Mary it once represented, carried reverently but cautiously. This period of seclusion also hardened the shogunate's resolve. Patrols intensified, and informants infiltrated even the most remote hamlets. Yet, paradoxically, the longer the faith was suppressed, the more tenaciously it survived underground. The Kakura Kirishitan developed complex social networks, passing down secret knowledge through whispered stories and coded rituals. Despite the silence imposed by the shogunate, you can almost hear the faint echo of chants rising from hidden homes, the rustle of prayers slipping through bamboo screens, the quiet faith held in hearts that refused to be broken. The isolation lasted over 2 centuries, during which Japan changed in countless ways, but the story of Christianity became a hidden thread running through the tapestry of the nation's history, quiet, fragile, but enduring. As the sun sets behind the distant hills, casting long shadows over the sea, you feel the profound solitude of this era, a time when faith and fear intertwined beneath a veil of silence. You step into a small, dimly lit room inside a humble Japanese house, nestled in a quiet village surrounded by rolling hills. The walls are adorned with simple scrolls and delicate paintings, works of art that seem at first glance to depict traditional Japanese themes: serene landscapes, gentle waves, blooming flowers. But as your eyes linger, you notice subtle symbols woven into the brushstrokes, hidden crosses, angels with softly folded wings, and faint inscriptions in a language long forgotten. This room belongs to descendants of the Kakure Kirishitan, the hidden Christians who preserved their faith through centuries of secrecy. Their creativity became a quiet rebellion, a way to embed their beliefs in the cultural fabric of their lives without attracting suspicion. Art became a vessel for faith, carrying secret meanings accessible only to those who knew where and how to look. You imagine the delicate process of creating these pieces. Paintings were carefully crafted to appear innocuous, yet each brushstroke held layers of significance. Small statues, resembling Buddhist or Shinto figures, were in fact representations of Christian saints or the Virgin Mary. Traditional Japanese poetry and songs took on new dimensions, encoding prayers and scripture in the rhythms and metaphors of the language. These artistic expressions were more than mere camouflage. They were a form of devotion, a spiritual lifeline. They allowed hidden Christians to feel connected to their faith and community, even as outwardly they lived as loyal subjects of the shogunate. You sense the profound patience and ingenuity required to maintain these cultural treasures, passed down through generations by word of mouth, hand to hand. Each piece tells a story not just of belief, but of survival, adaptation, and the human spirit's refusal to be erased. In this quiet room, surrounded by symbols both visible and concealed, you feel the lingering presence of a faith that endured in whispers and brushstrokes, a testament to those who loved and preserved their beliefs against all odds. You find yourself now in the early morning light filtering through the paper windows of a modest tea house in Nagasaki, a city that once was the gateway between Japan and the outside world. The air carries the faint scent of brewing green tea and the soft murmur of a city awakening after centuries of quiet seclusion. This moment marks the beginning of a slow transformation, a time when Japan's long policy of isolation begins to unravel, and with it, the fragile re-emergence of Christianity. The year is 1853, and beyond the peaceful streets, foreign ships, most notably the black-hulled vessels of Commodore Perry, have arrived, forcing the shogunate to reconsider its strict policies. The enforced Sakoku era is ending, and with it comes a flood of new influences, ideas, and challenges. The shogunate's grip loosens, and missionaries once again begin to set foot on Japanese soil, cautiously at first, then more openly. You picture the cautious steps of priests returning to communities that have preserved their faith in secret for generations. Many of the hidden Christians emerge from their shadows, revealing their long-suppressed beliefs to astonished new missionaries. The faith that had survived in silence now finds a voice again, often mixed with customs and practices that had evolved in isolation. Yet this re-emergence is complex and bittersweet. The hidden Christians face the challenge of reconnecting with a global church they barely recognize, while also grappling with their unique identity forged through centuries of secrecy. Some embrace the renewed contact with the Vatican, while others choose to maintain their distinct traditions, wary of losing the heritage they fought so hard to protect. The broader society also reacts with ambivalence. Decades of official persecution have left deep scars, and Christianity remains a minority faith, viewed with suspicion by many. The legacy of the Tokugawa era's violent suppression lingers in the collective memory. As you sit quietly in the tea house, sipping the warm brew, you feel the sense of a world in transition, old walls breaking down, a suppressed faith reawakening, and a nation stepping into a new era of openness and uncertainty. The story of Christianity in Japan is far from over. It continues to unfold, shaped by the echoes of the past and the possibilities of the future. You stand at the edge of a quiet hill, overlooking a small village, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The sky above shifts from pale blue to deep indigo, stars beginning to shimmer faintly. Here, in this peaceful moment, the long and turbulent story of Christianity in Japan seems to settle gently, Like the final page of a deeply human tale, you think back across centuries, the arrival of foreign missionaries, the blossoming of faith, and then its harsh suppression by the Tokugawa shogunate, enforced by samurai warriors who sought order above all. You recall the secret prayers whispered in hidden homes, the courage of those who refused to renounce their beliefs despite torture and death. You remember the Shimabara rebellion, a desperate flame of resistance that was extinguished with cruel force, yet left an enduring mark on history. You realize the story is not only about violence and suppression, but also about adaptation, resilience, and the quiet power of faith to survive under impossible conditions. The Kakure Kirishitan preserved their beliefs in art, song, and ritual, transforming their faith into something uniquely Japanese, while holding on to the essence of what they believed. As Japan opened to the world again, Christianity re-emerged, altered but alive. Its journey forever shaped by those who suffered in silence and those who fought openly. The legacy is complex, a reminder of cultural collision, fear, hope, and the enduring human spirit. You breathe deeply in the cool evening air, feeling the calm after the storm. This story, like the fading light, carries a quiet dignity. It is a tale of endurance against erasure, of identities reshaped but never lost. As the stars fully emerge, you feel the weight of history and the gentle promise of change, intertwined and ongoing. The past is never truly gone. It lives within us, waiting to be remembered. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a chapter of history that holds so much quiet strength and resilience. As you settle in now, let the gentle whispers of the past ease your mind and soothe your thoughts. Allow the calmness of this story to carry you softly into rest, where the shadows of yesterday give way to the peace of night. May your sleep be deep and undisturbed, and may you wake refreshed, carrying with you a sense of calm and wonder. Good night.